It'll be a sharp divide between who has the active weather and who doesn't have a whole lot. Plus, keeping an eye on some additional dust. I want to cover that all the way through the end of the week. Thank you for joining me. I'm meteorologist Brian Shields here on Weather Europe. It is the 9th of March, 2026. It is a Monday. We're going to take you through the week ahead with some aggressive weather for some of us. Others, though, again, drier. Let me touch on this dust, though, that has been an issue for many of us over the last week or so. This gives us a feel where you're seeing some of these yellow shadings, and you've seen some of this lifting up to the north. We've had it back through Denmark, the Netherlands. We've been watching out for some of the dust. Germany, just to give you a sample, creeping all the way up towards Sweden. We've been watching some of the dust. But for many of us, it has been lessening, so this is really today into tomorrow. By the end of the week, while as a whole it is really less across Europe, it is more across northern sections of North Africa. We'll see if any of this does lift to the north, so we'll be tracking that in upcoming videos. It could slide to the north, little spin may develop and draw some of that to the north. If you're subscribed, I'll put out some additional updates on the dust and you'll get those alerts. Now, looking at the next 7 days where we get additional precipitation, rainfall, even some snow, and some of us where we get some snow while it won't be widespread, we're going to see some higher totals. Now, where we have these greens, France, for example, back toward the UK, Ireland, parts of Norway, this would be above average, even where we have some of the blues. But then we swing back toward eastern sections where we have some of those browns, that's below average rain. So it's a sharp divide. We'll be a little bit cooler than average, but that's because we'll have some additional rain. Portugal and Spain, many of us, much of us, will be running above average. You see those colorings in some of the reds, some of those oranges. That's some of the above average temperatures. So we'll be kind of working into that spring pattern. Now let's start wide to give us a feel. You can pick a spot on the map where you are. Here's Iceland, Ireland, the Azores back through Portugal, Spain. Here's Morocco, Italy right here. Here's France. We get back toward Finland, watching Romania. Here are a couple spins working in. Again, western sections, that's where it's going to be a lot more active, not as much to the east. Now, as we work our way forward into our Tuesday, you see some of the moisture here. Here's that little spin working its way toward Norway. Another one with some more rain. This is where it'll be a little bit more of an aggressive pattern back through Ireland and the UK. And here's that spin near Morocco, Algeria, back through Spain, with some of that rain here keeping those temperatures below average. Then you see that shot of some of that rain working in. This is by the time we get into Wednesday, Denmark, south back through France, and that will bring additional snow to the Alps. We'll track that in a second. And then watching this little piece here and another one right here. Let's go Wednesday into Thursday, and you see that rain working in. So this is where it's going to be active. Norway will see some of that snow by the time we get out of Thursday over towards Scotland, and then some of this will move in. But you see, as it works its way off toward the east, it loses its punch. Once you get around Poland, for example, not much activity at all, at least in the short term. By Friday, though, we'll see more of this trying to work in. You see some of this additional rain. But again, as a whole, as it works across from the west to the east, it generally falls apart. So that's why I mentioned western sections more active, eastern sections not a whole lot. So let me take you around with what to expect. Let's slide into our Tuesday here. Here's Iceland. Here's that additional spin coming in as we get deeper into Tuesday. That rain works across Ireland and the UK. By Wednesday, watching that Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg for some of that rain here on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, you see here additional rain, even more active. Scotland will be watching out for some of that snow around. Some of this rain could be quite heavy and then working its way into Norway with additional rain and snow, especially southern sections pivoting its way towards Sweden. Finland, not as much. By Friday, some snow northern sections, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, just name a few spots. Belarus, generally quieter, but there's some of that additional rain. Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, back through France by the time we get into the end of the week. Here's a closer look. I want to continue to take you around, then we'll get into the rain and snow totals. You see some of this rain that will be working in as we work our way into Tuesday. Deeper into Tuesday, as I mentioned, Ireland seeing some of that rain, the showery weather, some gusty winds at times too working across. Here's Wednesday. By Wednesday afternoon, you see Switzerland, Austria getting some snow across the Alps. There's that additional rain through France, and this is that active pattern. So again, another shot working in by the time we get into Thursday. That's where we get even more, some higher rain totals. Not as much across England, a little bit more as we work our way towards Scotland, Wales. We could get some scattered showers, heavier Northern Ireland, watching out for some of that rain moving across. And then by Friday, sliding back through the Netherlands and Belgium, and still in the wake of it, watching out for some additional rain back through Ireland and the UK on Friday. Southern sections, here's a little spin that we're watching. You get over toward Monaco, for example, watching out for some of the rain, but just watching this spin through here. Here's Valencia bringing in some of that rain for tomorrow. And you see some of the scattered showers around, but it's really northern sections back through France on Wednesday that will bring some of the additional snow back through the Alps.
Of course, not widespread as we continue to work our way deeper into March, and then as we swing back through Thursday, things are a little bit more settled, but by the end of the week, we'll keep an eye on some dust and that next system moving in. Friday in particular, keeping an eye on Portugal, Spain, France for some additional rain. We'll see how this shakes out as we go throughout the week, scattered about as we work our way back throughout much of Italy as we go over the next few days, a little bit more on Friday. So here's Italy, Kosovo, Bulgaria, for example, and again, here's that spin just kind of going out in time Wednesday. Here's late on Wednesday, and you could see some of those scattered showers, but just not as active. Turkey, Cyprus, not as much, spotty showers. Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Albania, scattered about through Italy. And then we'll see how much of this hangs together, but again, as most of this has been working in, will work in throughout the week. It will weaken as it eventually moves across into eastern sections and southeastern over toward the Balkans with not a whole lot of action. So scattered about, but watching out for some higher snow totals in spots. Again, we're not going to see it widespread, but where we get it, the totals will be a little bit higher than what we had last week. You see some spots over toward Norway over the next 7 days, 40 plus centimeters, 30 plus to the north, 20, keeping an eye on northern sections of Sweden back toward Finland for some of that additional snow, and then again right back through the Alps, a little bit more than last week. Nothing super crazy, but 20 to 30 centimeters in some spots. So we'll get a little bit more in spots just with that moisture that we'll be working across, but keeping an eye on the rain. This takes us through about Thursday with some of the totals. I mentioned earlier how some spots not a lot, but others will see quite a bit. Of course, some of this may be some snow mixing in, but you get over toward Ireland, we could have some spots upwards of 50 to 75 millimeters of rain, depending on how this shakes out as we go forward. Watching Norway as well, of course, some of this will be snow, but you see that difference just looking at the coloring on the map. Western sections, that's where we have some of the rain, 25 to 75 millimeters of rain. Could see a little bit more parts of France. And then watching it scattered about as we work our way back through Italy, could even get a couple thunderstorms, watching out for a few downpours back through Italy, but you see Hungary over toward Austria, just naming a couple spots. Again, just not as much back through Ukraine, down through Turkey. It is going to be a little bit quieter. So monitoring the dust that will be on the move, we'll see if it does lift north later this week. I mentioned it's going to build again, even more so back through Africa. We'll see if any of it lifts to the north. Areas of rain moving by, and some of those snow totals where we get it will be a little bit higher as we go throughout the week. So let me know how you're doing in your comments. Put your weather, if you've had any of the dust, your location, so others could get a handle on that as well. Otherwise, thank you for joining me and have a really good start to the week.